If you are not with us, you are against us. We are now seeing a mass push towards hatred of Russia. If you don't hate Russia, you are hated. And Justin, why is this?
Oh, well, it's because people want consensus and they want to serve the consensus monster. So here's the deal, right? When it comes to geopolitics, I know enough to know I know like virtually nothing. Like, we just see the tip of the iceberg poorly, if that. And there's so much more that lurks beneath the surface. But here's the thing, right? When I look at the Russia and the Ukraine situation, and of course, anytime, you have belligerents involved, it's tragic. People die. Yes, that's a fact of life. And I don't mean to downplay it. And of course, it's tragic. But setting that aside for a second, here's the thing. A repeated narrative that I've heard from both the right, from the left, from the MSNBCs to the Fox Newses, et cetera, even to the Alex Joneses, to the Mother Jones or whatever, right? I keep hearing that Putin doesn't know what he's doing. Putin's an idiot, whatever. And this is something that I'm not quite sure I agree with it. And here's what I mean by this. Just hear me out. I'm not trying to make a moral judgment here. Okay. I'm just trying to say, like, what is really going on here? One of my favorite authors, and if you've ever read any of these books, you probably hear a lot of the phrases that I speak from him, a guy named George Friedman, who's wrote multiple books on the subject. But his comment was that the reason the KGB, the secret police of the USSR, had such power is because it was the one part of government that didn't intentionally lie to themselves. Putin himself came up through the KGB, and since then, the FSB, which is the successor to the KGB, continues to, should we say, exert an outsized influence in maintaining the security apparatus of the Russian state. The reason I mention all of this is that Putin, who cut his teeth in intelligence, who's held on to power for 2 decades, going on. You can be many things. You can be a horrible, despotic dictator and all these bad things. I'm not trying to argue that point. But I'm trying to say, like, listen, you don't get to that level of power and stay in that level of power by being a fool. And so I think if people want to paint, Putin's a bad person, therefore he's an idiot, I think that's a very dangerous thing to do because it misunderstands the problem. Just like the KGB got its power from not intentionally lying to ourselves or to themselves, if we intentionally lie to ourselves and say, "Oh, well, it just makes us feel good to think Putin's an idiot or whatever," right? I don't think that's the correct framing of the situation. The second thing is that when you look at actually what's happened since then, you have all the West basically responding, putting on sanctions, and people who are doing some things that again might make them feel good in the short run, but in the long term, like I don't think people are really thinking this things through, or if they're thinking it through, they're not thinking it through very well. So, anyways, that's just kind of what I wanted to, share when I look at what's going on, because again, call Putin many things. I'm not here I'm trying to say that's not the case, but to say he's an idiot or he can't do forecasting in geopolitics, I disagree with that. If by no other reason, the evidence that he's been in power and has maintained power for the better part of 2 decades, as well as his, I guess, career in intelligence before that.
Something I also find very interesting are these sanctions because what are they really going to do? And when you dig down deep into it, it is just virtue signaling. And whatever cost or whatever perceived benefit that we have, it is going to wildly, wildly outweigh the cost that we are going to overlay. And it is going to get ugly. What is sanctioning Russia doing to Russia? Not a whole lot. Frankly, their ruble's starting to increase in price. They're still exporting everything to other countries, but what's going to happen to the consumers that are actually putting on these tariffs? And there's going to be famine in a lot of these woke countries, and it is in a lot of gas shortages. Why is this? Just in the US, they can make all the food, grow all the food that we could ever need. I completely agree with you with that, but we need the fertilizer. And what are the components of fertilizer? You need three main components. 40% of the potash of the world comes from Russia and Belarus, and those two are buddy buddy. What is happening here? If we can't get the potash, we can't get the fertilizer because we can't get the phosphorus and then the nat gas as well. Basically, a lot of these components that go into actual gas, go into fertilizer, is being sanctioned. And just rough numbers, let's say 40% of the supply of the potash goes offline. In the US, great. It is a very low portion of our income. Maybe we see some food lines and the food prices get out of control. Maybe 20, we see a 100% increase from here, but we will survive. What happens in Italy, in Rome, and these countries that don't have an extremely strong currency, in Germany, who is very reliant on Russia for their food? It is going to get extremely, extremely ugly because instead of them paying 100% higher price increases, they won't even be able to afford them. And not affording them, I think, will lead to riots, Arab Spring type of event. It looks like the West is going to kill themselves while Russia and China walk.
Josh, there's a scene from an old TV show that I really like called Yes Minister, and it's the show about from the early '80s BBC classic. There's a scene where you have the ministers. It would be like our version of like the Secretary of State, or Secretary of whatever, right? And it's a fictional character in a fictional department, but basically it's like the he works for the Bureau of Bureaucracy, or it's called the Administration for Administrative Affairs. And the episode set up like this. So the minister is informed that gun running is going on and that sanction busting to export arms are going on. And he decides that he's going to tell the prime minister so the prime minister can deal with it. In the process of trying to tell the prime minister, he's intercepted by another high level party member that basically says, like, listen, and the minister's name is Jim. Jim, let me explain to you, how the world really works. If you want to go through and tell the prime minister that we're sanction busting, go ahead, do it. Martyr yourself in a glorious glut of like moral outrage. But let me tell you what's going to happen. Number one, nothing's going to happen, because where do you think the government places these weapons contracts? In marginal constituencies. Number two, do you think that you can actually pick off one or two little arms dealers and that someone else isn't going to immediately come back on? And he basically gives Jim, who's a very idealistic character, and to his credit, but you have him confronted with this very realistic, gritty, like, this is the way the world works, Buttercup. And it's not the way you might want it to work. It's not the way you may feel it should work. It's simply the way that it does work. So anyways, I think that's the interesting thing. The other thing I'll note too is that you keep seeing, and I don't know how to weight this, but I see it keep cropping up and up and up. I would be really curious to know, what was the U.S. doing, or what was the U.S. funding? I'll say it like that, if anything. What was the U.S. funding, if anything, in Ukraine, particularly in regards to biological research? I don't know if we were doing anything, but I keep hearing stuff around the corners. And I'm not sophisticated enough to do a FOIA, but I would be very curious if someone did a FOIA, particularly in regard to like a financial audit. I want to see who was spending the money. So you're going to look at the Department of State, or you're going to look at the military, and I want to see what it was spent on. And generally, the more happy the name sounds, the more terrified you should be. If you see something along the lines of, oh, this is a lab to figure out how to reduce harm and, make everyone happy. Oh God, run for the hills, because it's the exact opposite, exact effing opposite of it.
What I find crazy is the mass hatred towards Russia. And to say
Yeah.
what you want, oh, because Putin is doing this, we now have to hate all Russians. What happened just to a few months ago, where everybody's equal? Um, everyone's equal except those who are less equal than others. I just find it very interesting how our narrative can switch on the dime of a hat, from wearing masks and anyone who does not have a certain medicine is hated and evil. Now those people are fine. Those people are fine because we just got to push all that under the table. That doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter whatever evidence comes out. Don't That does not matter, Justin. It's that's forgotten about. If you are okay with these things, great. If you are fine with hating Russians and hating people who don't get a jab, fine. Eventually, they are going to come after you and something that you believe in. It does not matter what it is, because once the consensus monster changes and everybody formulates an identity around that consensus monster, they will come to hate you as well. It is a very slippery slope to censor certain groups. They're now talking about censoring anyone talking slightly different about Russians or climate change or COVID. Anything, fine. If you believe that those things are great, who cares? Go for it. If you think that we should censor those groups, people talking against them, that is just leading down a very, very dark alley, and to a point
Yeah.
where they're going to censor everything. And until they censor something that you actually believe in, and there's nothing you can do because it is far too late.
Strange time when we seem to be ruled by our feelings versus at least trying to make the appearance of ruling by, or this reasoning by a logic and fact. But so be it. Such is the world we live in. Hopefully, we get through it without any permanent damage.
Hopefully is right. Thank you, and continue to stand up for thinking critically. And we will see you on the next one.